Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it around me and definitely in front of me today. So this might be a bit of a spoiler basically, but I wanted to touch today on the Alocasia Frydek specifically, and Frydek we'll come back to in just a few moments. But is this a plant maybe that you've already got in your collection? Is this a plant that you're going to be adding to your collection quite soon? Is it one that if you do have in your collection, maybe you've struggled along the way? Hopefully I'll be able to share some of my experiences during the video and that might help you along the way. Right, without further ado, let's dive into it. So let's touch on the Frydek thing really quickly. And I think I've done a previous video on the Frydek specifically, but maybe we can go a bit more in depth today during this video. But when I kind of use air quotes to talk about the Frydek or the Frydek, no T at the end, the Frydek, the Alocasia Frydek is one that has been misnamed a lot. And that might come as to a bit of a shock to some people. I think there's more of a momentum at the moment of people being aware of this fact. But this isn't the Frydek. Don't worry, don't stress, don't call your plant stores and say you've sold me the wrong plant. I asked for the Frydek and I didn't get the Frydek. It's something that's happened along the way that people started calling this specific Alocasia the Alocasia Frydek. In actuality, what this is the Alocasia miscaliciana. The Frydek is actually the variegated version of the miscaliciana, and you'll get some amazing kind of white sectoral variegations or even some splattering of variegation. This was a plant, the actual Frydek, the variegated miscaliciana, was one that has been very difficult for a lot of people to find. I don't know if you've tried purchasing something like an Alocasia over the mail, especially during the winter months like what we've got now. But Alocasias aren't one of the best things when it comes to being shipped in any way or form. They can throw a bit of a hissy fit. They might go into dormancy. You might get a lot of stress on the leaves. A lot of the times, if there isn't actually any root rot and there isn't anything wrong with the corm, then it shouldn't cause too many issues. But this is a plant that, as I said, it doesn't ship particularly well, and there wasn't a lot of the variegated ones around. Can you imagine how much harder it is to ship something like a variegated Alocasia if the standard Alocasias are a bit more temperamental? Variegated plants generally don't do that well in the post. But that would explain partially why there wasn't as many variegated Alocasias, and note the use of the word was, because there are more. I've seen a lot more coming into the market recently, notably, and I don't know by the time this video comes out whether or not this would have already launched and sold out already, because I'm assuming it's going to go super fast. Sarah at Eastern Tropicals, which is one of the local plant stores here which sells nationally to the UK, I think hinted at the fact that she might be having some of the variegated versions of this. I haven't cross-referenced this with Sarah yet, but based on something that she put on her Instagram recently, I think she's managed to score a few of these. I'm assuming they're not going to be cheap, and I'm also assuming that they're going to go super fast. I mean, they're going to be cheap because it's Sarah and it's Eastern Tropicals, and anybody who's bought in the UK from Eastern Tropicals will know generally that Sarah's prices are actually quite reasonable for what she's actually selling. She doesn't kind of gouge on prices. But yeah, so there are a few more that are coming into the market. I'm seeing more talk and more whispers about it online, on Instagram and things like that. So I think there's more of them that are going to be coming into the market. I highly doubt that for the actual Frydek, so the variegated miscaliciana, that there's going to be an awful lot of them coming in. But keep an eye out. You might see some of those coming across. Obviously, be careful, be aware that obviously anything that's variegated and an Alocasia might struggle a bit in the post, but as long as it's fine, it will bounce back. Don't stress about it if you get a plant and it's kind of struggling a bit. They don't particularly like being shipped, the green ones or the variegated ones. But coming back to the green version of this Alocasia. So talking about the Alocasia Frydek, one of the things that you'll see, and I'll pick my one up purely because it's on a table now and you're only seeing a small fraction of it. I will show you it in all of its glory and I will quickly put it back down because it is exceptionally heavy. But so my Alocasia Frydek has kind of taken over an entire bay window, as you can probably imagine, just purely from the size of this thing in my living room. Now, the other thing as well I might mention, let me see if I can pick it up yet again. I think I'm going to be picking up this a lot of times. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 growth points in here, and I got it as a single stem. So talking about Alocasias more specifically and how they would grow, they do send little bulblets, little corms into the soil, and then that's how it will propagate. So in terms of propagation with Alocasia, you're kind of slightly limited to what the plant will produce in terms of little bulblets. You can either let them be in the same pot, in the same soil, and then they will grow up and you'll have multiple stems growing within the same pot, or around usually the time when you'd want to repot, you might fish some of those out from in the soil and then try propagating them separately so they can create their own individual plants. You can also, depending on how much you want to do this, because it probably will stress the plant, obviously don't do what I'm going to say now in the winter. This is probably more of a spring-summer thing. You can, when you're repotting, pull out the established secondary plantlets from the soil and give them their own soil media or their own growing media, and that's how you also get multiple plants then. I find that that method for me is more successful because I'm kind of letting the plants grow, the little plantlets grow in the soil, and a lot of the times when you're kind of digging through the soil and you're doing the repot, you might find little bulblets that seem like they might be detached from the mother plant. A lot of the times the ones that do really well are the ones that have still got a bit of an attachment to the mother plant whilst they settle into their own roots. So imagine that there's, I think it's a root structure, I'm not entirely sure, but there is something that looks like a root structure that connects the main rootstock of the mother plant to the little bulblet or the corm, even I think with an M at the end. And it kind of helps provide some nourishment, at least this is what I'm suspecting here, until it forms its own roots. And this is very similar, I'm trying to think of other plants that do this. So Sansevieria, or now recently been reclassified as Dracaena or the snake plant, they do something similar. They will grow another cluster of leaves because they grow in a similar way. So it's attached to the main rootstock from the mother plant, and then that secondary plant will then grow from there. So this is why, at least in my experience, I find that the corms that are still in the pot with the mother plant, a lot of the times they're still attached for a while until they get established. Those ones are better to let them grow out a bit and then separate them rather than taking out the little baby corms that are usually detached from the mother plant. And I know some people struggle with them, and the ones that don't struggle with them do say that it takes a while for them to root out. The interesting thing with that is, and this is just a hypothesis on my part, is as those are ones that are not connected to the mother plant, whether or not the mother plant is kind of almost sacrificing them slightly and saying, right, you're on your own. I don't think you're strong enough to still be attached to me. If you survive, you survive. If not, meh. So I'm wondering whether or not that's why some of those are a bit harder to propagate on their own directly from the corm. And I'd be interested to hear people's opinions. Do drop your thoughts on this down below, especially if you've tried this yourself. I'd be really curious to see. I've not done that as an experiment yet. This has actually kind of got the cogs turning in my head and thinking I might actually try this in the spring summer and maybe kind of remove some corms and maybe see if I can catch a corm that's still attached to the mother plant and got some roots and put them against each other and see, or actually just to be a bit more fair, two corms, one that isn't attached to the mother plant, the other one that is, detach that from there basically, and then see if all things being equal, if neither one of those two is supported by the mother plant, whether or not they will have the same amount of growth. But as per usual, I've gone off on a massive tangent. Hopefully, I've had a few of my subscribers on here and a few of my followers on Instagram saying they like the longer videos because I might go off on slight tangents and they'll learn things that way as well. So hopefully this is useful and it's not just me going off on random tangents. But back to the Frydek, and I know the Miscaliciana Frydek, and I keep putting a T at the end of it, so Miscaliciana Frydek. This is one that was harder to find for a long period of time, and I'm specifically talking about the UK market because that's the one that I've got direct experience from here, but I'm assuming a lot of the times what we get in the UK market is the same in Europe. I don't know about other parts of the world, but this became a lot more available recently, in the last year and a half, where this was one that would only not very often, but it would come up occasionally to be bought, and it had a relatively hefty price tag. At least here it'd be usually on the high double digits, maybe for a slightly larger plant it'd be on the low triple digits. At the moment, and again, tell me if you're seeing this around where you are as well, I am seeing these crop up in plant nurseries and plant shops. Granted, they're still not the cheapest alocasia for you to buy, and it's usually a single stem growing out from a single corm, I would imagine at that point, with maybe 3 or 4 leaves. Nowhere near kind of this size of a leaf. I'm trying to see if there's any smaller leaves, maybe this size. And then you would grow it out yourself. But it's really come down in price and it's become a lot more available. Obviously, the supply and demand thing will always happen. But this has become a lot more available here, and it's nice because actually, and this is something I was talking about with an amazing plant friend that I have on Instagram, and we've been prattling on and talking for many years now, actually. And she made a very valid point for all of us that are into collecting plants. What we think is cool and what we are striving to get isn't necessarily something that everybody gets, if that makes sense. So, and she was making this comment, and I think I've noticed this from my kind of friends and family when they come over to see the plants. The ones that they gravitate towards, 9 times out of 10, aren't the rare plants or the rare, I hate using that expression, but the more difficult plants to find that we all strive to kind of get out there and buy. They tend to go for weird plants. Ones that are kind of different and unusual, and it kind of makes sense. It's human nature. You will gravitate towards something that looks different from the norm. And essentially, there's a very long-winded way of me trying to say it, that this breaks the mold slightly with that. So this is a plant that's one that's attractive to a lot of us that have maybe got collections and wanted to, and people that are not worried about trying alocasias. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But with this plant, because of maybe the leaf shape, because of that very strong veination in the middle, it is one that tends to capture people's attention even if they're not into plants, because it's just like, oh, that looks a bit weird and a bit odd. I think somebody said that the leaves of the Alocasia Miscaliciana Frydek, oh my god, it's a mouthful, and you can understand why they shortened it down to Frydek even though it's not a Frydek. You can understand why they'll go towards this, and somebody actually mentioned that this reminds me a bit of kind of African tribal masks, and I know it's kind of one of those, if you squint hard enough you can maybe think of the shape and the kind of wood carvings and the kind of the bright patterning on there. That's probably what's kind of bringing that image to their mind, and it kind of makes sense. But overall, I would say, based on the number of alocasia that I've grown over the years, and for the people that are new here, I've been kind of helping. I've had my own collection now for a few years, but I've been helping my family since I was very young, about 5 or 6 years old. This was my chore, as I was supposed to take care of my mother's hundreds of houseplants. Started off young. The one thing I will always say, because I always used to take care of alocasia and colocasia from a very, very young age, is this isn't one that's particularly difficult, to be fair. It's probably not going to be one that I would suggest would be a first alocasia for some people, although some people do make it work. I've got some very, very close friends who are only just getting into their houseplants a bit more, and it's a couple, and the lady from that group of friends, she really fell in love with this plant, and obviously look at it. So she got it, and it was her first alocasia, and she's always a bit worried about what things are happening with it and all these things, but she's managing to keep it alive. And that tells you a lot, not to kind of poo-poo all my friend's experience, but even somebody who hasn't dealt with an alocasia, with the kind of right level of guidance, they can get the care for this down okay. So let's talk about some of the usual issues that you might get with this one, and I can see some on here. At the moment, slight bit of webbing there, and I'll see if I can bring up an older leaf, and you might be able to see, yeah, can you see that discoloration there? The people that have got alocasias will know what I'm about to say. Spider mite magnets. And what I'll always do, and I'll see if I can pull it up from here, is I will use predatory mites, and I've said this on videos time and time again, and I will say this until I'm blue in the face because this is a thing that's really worked for me. The problem with satchels of predatory mites, it doesn't work particularly well in the winter, and the one thing that not a lot of people talk about, and yes, there's a lot of pests in the summer, but spider mites, specifically if you've got them in a household environment, is the one thing that could happen quite easily to an alocasia during winter, because those slightly drier situations indoors with central heating is what causes it to be much more desirable towards spider mites. So what I'll do is I'll use the predatory mites in the spring and get it as a preventative and have them on throughout the spring and the summer. And in the winter months, I'll usually, I mean, these are dead. I should really be removing them, but I'm a bit lazy. I'll remove those normally. And usually if I'm seeing any spider mite issues during the winter, I will either use horticultural soap or I'll use my neem oil solution and spray it down. And to be fair, unlike a lot of the other alocasias, at least in my experience, the Frydek doesn't tend to get severe infestations very, very quickly. Others will. I'm thinking of my Alocasia amazonica or the Alocasia poly. That one will get spider mites, and that one you'll blink and it will not just be a few spider mites, it will be a full-on infestation that you have to deal with. This one doesn't get them quite as quickly, at least in my experience. Now, I've talked about this previously in terms of soil. I will always use a chunky aroid soil mix, and I've got a soil mix, my chunky aroid soil mix video on my channel, and if I can remember and I can find how to link it, I'll put it somewhere up here again. Pray for me. But hopefully I'll get that up there so you can see what I do to mix this up. I will usually have them in a plastic pot because you want to maintain some of the moisture. These plants are plants that normally, if I'm not mistaken, in nature will grow near waterways, so near rivers and lakes and things like that. So they don't mind having a bit more moisture, but they're still an aroid. They still like an airy soil mix. They don't want it to be really, really dense. So that is something that I will always do. Always in a plastic pot. I want to retain some of that moisture as much as possible. I've talked about this previously. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. I like to have my alocasias a bit pot bound. I find they grow faster and they grow larger leaves. And this is something that I saw from a video that Summer Rain Oaks did probably a couple of years ago at this point. But it hasn't done me wrong in any way or form. It's done really well for a lot of my alocasias, especially the larger ones that are a bit more pot bound. They just keep on going, essentially. Obviously, there's going to be a point where you're going to need to repot most things, but don't be too quick to repot your alocasias, is what I'm going to say here. And they're also particularly powerful plants when it comes to root rot, I found. Maybe because they're used to growing close to a lot of water, they can have bits of their root system that have got root rot. It doesn't progress as quickly. It won't always kill the plants. You might see a bit of a fluctuation in the plant. Having said that, I've never lost an alocasia to root rot. I have recently almost, and this will tell you how strong and resilient these plants can be. My alocasia, oh, and I cannot remember now, it's the one that looks like a palm, and I'll see if I can put the name up here at some point. That plant, I'd moved to pond and I had it in self-watering. I think I rushed to get it in self-watering quicker than I should have done, and it had a bit of rot, but I was able to salvage about 90% of the plant, and it's all growing in different bits now, so that's fine. And that one was always one that I knew from other people who have struggled with it, that it's not one of the easiest alocasias because it's got so much less leaf on the actual leaves, that you can understand that it's probably going to be a bit more sensitive to issues like that. Yeah, watering, invest in a moisture meter, and I cannot stress this enough. And let me bring up mine and I will show you what I mean. If you take one thing away from this video, it is get a moisture meter. And I know some people don't like moisture meters, and they'll be in the comments, and I've had people in the comments saying, but it can give false positives and all these things. And I'm just like, yes, I get it. But for somebody who's just starting off, this is better than nothing. I've said it in one video before, and a few of you liked that comment. Knowing something due to experience only works if you've got the experience. So if you haven't got the experience, it's not obvious. So getting something like this is a nice little bit of a crutch in the beginning. And actually, I've still used mine years later. I've still got use for it even many, many years later in terms of checking the soil. And it hasn't really done me too badly. But definitely get a moisture meter. With this one, the curse that you will always get with alocasias is it will drop a leaf in order to get a leaf, so you don't ever end up with any more leaves. What you want to be doing is checking that you're watering just before it goes to dry, so at the very end of moist, and that's where your routine needs to happen with this plant. The other thing that a lot of people don't mention is when the plant is pushing out a new leaf, the water demands go up exponentially. So keep in mind, keep checking it. You will find your balance with your own alocasia. It might take a few weeks or even months until you kind of get that measuring right, because I know with this one, at this point in time, it does okay regardless of what I do, but when they're a bit smaller, I'll know that on average, I'll water it every 5 to 6 days. So I'll check it before I water it. But then if I see that a new leaf is actively trying to grow in, I might have to shift that watering schedule to be every 4 days until the leaf emerges, and then I'll put it back down again to what I was doing before. So there's a bit of balance that you need to do. And this is the thing, you won't know this in your environment until you test it for a few days and weeks, until you kind of know what that fluctuation is. And you'll just know, it'll become second nature, where it'll be like, okay, I'm watering this every 5, or at least checking before watering every 5 to 6 days. Oh, I can see a new leaf that's happening. I'm just going to water it a bit more frequently now until the leaf comes out, and then pull back again. And I know it might seem like a bit of a faff, but this plant and a lot of the other alocasias, I dare say, might be worth the travel and the faff. But yeah, anyway, I think I've prattled on for way too long. I'm always a bit aware of timing on videos. People say they wanted slightly longer videos, but at the same time, I don't want to have you sitting in front of your screen for like half the day watching a video of me prattling on, because I can talk about this all day. But yes, so hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.